Hey, good evening. I'll call the Wednesday, September 30th meeting of the Community Budget Advisory Committee to order. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded that the agenda be approved. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the motion is approved. Next up is item 3.1, the approval of the minutes. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the minutes be approved. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll come to a vote. All those in favor say aye, signify by aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries. We'll then go on to organizational business and information and updates. And Kari Carlson.
Yes, good evening, committee members, co-chairs and committee members. So similar to last week, rather than having a presentation with slides with the information and updates, we put it in the form of a memo with information. And just to give you the maximum amount of time for budget reduction discussion this evening. So unless there are any questions, we can move on to the next item. But are there any questions regarding what was in the memo?
Yeah, I'll open it up to questions on the memo. Anybody? Let me look here. I got to see if it get the participants up so I can see if his hand is up. Just a second. Button. Where's the button? There we go. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions there. So unless there is anything else that people want to ask about regarding that, we can be done with that item. Okay. Then let's move on to the continued discussion of potential budget reduction options. And I'm going to share my screen and kind of walk through what we're going to do tonight. Gotta adjust the size of this a little bit, just a second. Can you make me a presenter, Chris? Here we go. Okay, so tonight again we're going to be having some conversations about some targeted items in the list, and then we'll be walking back through again and having another round of dot exercise on the items in the list. We have a couple new items that we'll be having conversations about and asking questions about too. A couple things I want to point out in what we're going to be talking about tonight. Once we're done with the dot exercise, I'll be working with the staff to get these columns populated in the spreadsheet. So instead of working off of those large format sheets like we did the last time and walking through, we'll be moving that into the spreadsheet here because we need to be able to sort things and see where things land. The way this is going to work is, again, the dots have the same meaning as last time. You know, your goal is to have roughly a third of the dots in each of the columns. One thing that's a little bit different is that the way the dots work is we've assigned a weight to each dot. So the green dots are worth 9, the yellow are worth 6, and the red are worth 3. And what we'll do is we'll use that in order to kind of combine everyone's opinion of the items together and produce a rank ordering of the items. In the spreadsheet here, what you'll see, let me see if I can scoot this out of the way. You'll note over here on the J and K columns, this column shows the kind of cumulative value of all of the items that are kind of at that row and above. So a good example is, let's say that this order here, which right now it's just in the numeric order, but let's say that this was represented kind of the order we had set things in. At this line here, this $423,000 number is the sum of all of these items above that. Okay, so that gives you kind of a running total of what the weights that we've assigned are doing. And then the other thing I've done is I've gone through based on the the dollar scenarios that we've talked about. In this column K here, this shows you kind of where the breakpoints are between the scenarios. So in the order that we have things in right now, we would go down to item number 16 in order to get to the 5% levy scenario. In other words, we would have to take all of those items down to number 16 to do that. Then we need more items in order to get to the 3% levy. So that would take us down here to line 41 to get us to the 3% levy. Then we have the 0% levy. We have to pick up these items here. When we get down to the point here at this row, which is item number 70 in this unsorted list here, that's where it switches from items that would have to be picked in order to kind of meet our budget goals and ones that would be left in the budget for next year. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll resort this list once we've got the results of the dot exercise in there based on the weights. And then the thing that we discussed last time is we're not going to be able to discuss every single item. So the approach that I'd like to take is kind of in the neighborhood of the breakpoint. We'll talk about, do things belong kind of above the line or below the line, and talk about kind of relative values in that area, because that's really where the weights are making a difference as to whether it falls into one category or not. At the same time, we'll also have a conversation about whether, we'll also have a conversation about items where there's a fair amount of disagreement. And this variance column is a column that we'll use to, that's a measure of the amount of disagreement that we have in those weights. And we can use that to kind of sort things. And before we make final decisions, we'll talk about the items where there's a lot of disagreement in the committee about what ought to happen with that item. And then we can use that and we can look at the results of that and see if things are falling into the kind of set of categories that we'd like them to as part of the sorting process. So any questions about this before we move forward? Folks should have their spreadsheets from last week as a starting point for kind of receiving information and adjusting the order of things. I'm not gonna allow 5 minutes this time for dots, because I think we found that it takes more than 5 minutes to do dots. So that, just for the public who might be watching, that's probably going to be more like a 15-minute period rather than a 5-minute period. And then once that's done, we have a little bit of data entry to do, and we're going to divvy that work up among a couple people and try to get. We have a shared spreadsheet that I set up so that multiple people can be doing data entry at the same time, and we'll get that data loaded in there so that we can start looking at what the results of that are. So any questions process-wise about what we're going to be doing today? Josh?
Can you just repeat the color legend numbers?
Yeah, so again, and this is just numbers that we picked just purely in order to kind of assign weights to each number, each color. The green ones are counting as, where is it here? It's in here. Green is 9, yellow is 6, and red is going to be 3. So items with higher numbers in this score column are going to be generally items that got more green on them than yellow or red. So it's going to go from higher to lower. Okay?
Are we going to have access to the sheet you're showing?
In terms of like during the meeting or after the?
Well, sometime.
Oh, after the meeting, yeah. So this will be included. So what'll end up happening tonight is one of two things will happen. Either we'll look at the results of this and look at the order after we've had the discussions about the items that I put tick marks at, the discussions of the items that are in the neighborhood of where the breakpoints are, the discussions of the items where there's lots of disagreement. Once we're done with that, we'll either decide this is the list that we want to go out to the public for comment, or we can say we're going to sleep on it and come back next week and have a final round of conversations. If it goes to the public, it'll be in the minutes. We'll reformat this into something that's more consumable for the public to use. If it goes to the committee, we'll probably just take this spreadsheet and distribute it to the committee, and we'll come back next week and have a final conversation. That making sense? But to your first question, the answer is yes. Everybody, the public will get a copy. Everybody will get a copy of the spreadsheet when we're done.
Mr. Chair? Coach?
Yeah, Maureen.
It's been a long day, so don't mind my questions here, but I just want to make sure I understand. So when you go over to the far column, and of course, again, I forgot my glasses for today, the blue and the brown, that's kind of the differentiators of what we have to move towards,
Right.
based on the 0, 3, and 5,
Right.
correct?
Yeah. So what the way that worked is the staff went and calculated numbers for me. So the actual, we only need part of this item in order to get to the 5% levy, but since we either have to pick it or not, it's in or out.
So I guess my question is, when I go over the far left to look at the description, and then
Yep.
we have the green, the yellow, and the red, that's going to shift based on how the point system.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I'll give you a little
All right.
demo. So let's just
All right.
assume for the purposes of discussion that this one came in at 9, 0, and 0. Okay. And this one came in also. This one came in at 1 and 7 and 1. Okay. And then this one is at 9. Or excuse me. This one is at 9. To get a better example, 6, 2, 6, 1, and 2, like that. Okay, let's say that those are the values that we assign there. So the first one got 9 greens. The second one got 1 green, 7 yellows, and 1 red. The third one got 6 greens, 1 yellow, and 2 red. Okay, so if you look here, here's the order that they're in. This one got 81 points, this one got 54, and this one got 66. So what I'll do is I'll just go in here, I'll say sort largest to smallest. And you'll note here that this calculation changed a little bit to reflect the fact that the order of the items are different now. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll do that sorting, and then we'll see what ends up landing at that breakpoint in here and see if that makes sense. And when I've done this in the past, it's a good conversation to kind of focus on those breakpoints, because you can say, these things made it in, do they deserve to be cut versus these things that just fell outside of it? And that helps us have a kind of value-based discussion about those things where it was close in how we set things up. So,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I understand how this is going to work and what that might look like once we've gone through the exercise. But I have to confess again, quite literally, and glasses wouldn't help me, I can't see anything there.
Okay.
So I'm just wondering, for this first part, to go through the discussion, do I need to be able to see that, or
I don't
will
think
the
so.
stuff that we have? Okay.
I don't think so. So I think the way this is going to go down is we've got a couple new things that showed up at the meeting. So the staff has some information that they're going to want to present. There's also some of these where I have put tick marks on here as things that in looking at them, they're things we need to discuss. And a good example is this number 4, which is the reduce election cost if ranked choice voting is adopted. As a criterion for picking something for the committee, we said we were only going to pick things that we knew that were going to be doable. Okay, ranked choice voting, that's up to the voters. We don't know what the voters are going to do on that. I'm certain on the committee here that different people in the committee have different opinions about whether that ought to be adopted or not. But I think if you polled us on whether it was going to be adopted, nobody knows the answer to that. So the discussion I want to have on that, for example, is do we even want to consider that right now? Because we won't know. We won't know until, in fact, to be honest, we won't know until we have made our final decision and it gets sent to the council. So to be honest, I want to make sure that one gets taken out. But to your question, I think you can do this largely off of the sheet that you have in front of you. And then when we're talking about items at a particular level here, I can zoom it in a little bit and make it be bigger and have that work. And then I can also call off the numbers of the items that are just above the breakpoint and below so that you can get a sense of what they are. Okay?
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions on what we're doing here? So I'm going to go clear the scoreboard, and we will change the sorting back to the option numbers. Okay, so I think the first thing I'd like to do then is kind of go through and talk about the ones that I talked about discussing. And I think the first one is that ranked choice voting one. Generally speaking, I kind of explained my rationale on that. Are we okay with saying that that one we're not going to consider to be included, just because we can't? It's not knowable at this point.
I would agree with that.
Okay, everybody would do that. So the way I'm going to show that here is I'm just going to mark this one as a red 9. That will cause it to fall at the very bottom of the list of things. So moving onward then, the next thing I wanted to talk about was 46, 47, and 48, which are the various Bush Lake Beach options. And the reason I'm bringing these up is that there are some choices here that are mutually exclusive. Okay? And I think, was this where, Chris, was this where the staff had some information to show, or was it a different item?
Chair Peterson, Ann Catry, our Parks and Recreation Director, has some information on several other Park and Rec items, and she is on the line if there are questions about this.
Is it related to this one or some other ones?
To the best of my knowledge, she does not have prepared slides on this particular one, but is available for questions.
So what I want to point out to folks here is I changed the dollar amount associated with the no lifeguards or on-site coordinator to reflect just that increment that generates. In other words, what I'm trying to do is get these things so if we pick 2 of them, that foots correctly in the spreadsheet from a totaling perspective. And then I think this one here is mutually exclusive with these other 2, so I think we're going to have to go looking for that one. In other words, 48 assumes that we don't do 46 or excuse me, it basically assumes that we kind of do 47, so it's probably double counting in that regard. So I think we're going to have to resolve that when we get close to the end, if that one looks like it's making a difference. Okay? John?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I did have a question on that one. Are we still missing the worksheet on 48? I couldn't find that one in my revised packet. I'm sorry, I'm mumbling. Are we still missing the worksheet on 48, or was it here and I just couldn't find it?
I think that one might,
Still is missing.
I think that one still might be missing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Maybe we can, if Ann's on the call, maybe we can get Ann to talk a little bit about that one.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. So you are specifically asking about number 48, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, thank you. So this option would be the option of just turning over the beach operation to Three Rivers Park District and leaving us still with the maintenance of the park. So it is very similar, honestly, to the one above that would provide us park maintenance. But in this option, we would be turning over the operation of the lifeguards to Three Rivers Park District.
Did that answer your question, John?
Yeah, it does. Is there one then that would turn over the maintenance piece, irrespective of the lifeguard question, to Three Rivers or not?
Thank you very much, Commissioner. We don't have an actual submittal for that one. As you are aware, we have just very recently begun conversations with the Three Rivers Park District. And honestly, because of the status of those discussions, we felt like it was a little premature, but it is definitely something that we are interested in pursuing.
Sure. Thank you. That helps. I just wanted to make sure my numbers were.
Okay.
Thank you.
So any other questions on those? Maureen?
So we are missing 47 too. 47 and 48 pages are missing.
So Ann, can you talk about that? I think 47 basically additive to 46. So it may be that I can't remember if those were carried together in there or not.
Okay.
So
I'm sorry, I'm not sure why there is a sheet missing on that. But number 46 would not provide any lifeguards. But it would provide just one person to offer some supervision at the beach, which here we're calling a site coordinator. And we would continue to provide the park maintenance services there. Number 48 does not provide any lifeguards or any site coordination. We would just provide the park maintenance. So the difference in between these two is whether or not there is a site coordinator working.
Mr. Chair.
yeah, go ahead, Josh.
And this Josh, would the Three Rivers District provide lifeguard services?
Mr. Commissioner, thank you for the question. One other option, again, that is not on the table here, again, because it was a little bit premature. One option would be for the park district to provide lifeguards and maintenance services. That's the one that is not at all before you this evening. But option number 48 is the option of having the Three Rivers Park District provide the lifeguard services, but we would continue to offer the park maintenance services. So number 48 is the one in which we would turn over operations of just the beach to Three Rivers. 47 and 46 provide no lifeguards, and 46 provides a coordinator.
But 48 does provide a lifeguard.
48 provides, actually, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm going to take that back. I would not be the one to say whether or not Three Rivers would provide lifeguards. In fact, I would say that at some of the beaches that Three Rivers offers, they don't offer lifeguards at their beaches. They do just provide a site coordinator.
Thank you.
So again, the conversations haven't quite gone to that level yet. But in my initial conversations, Three Rivers Park District would likely not provide lifeguards, just provide a site coordinator.
Okay. Any other questions on that? Okay, then. So I don't think the result of that was that we're going to introduce any new option there, because the Three Rivers thing was really at Three Rivers' discretion what they ended up doing. So unless somebody thought we were going to that create another option, I'm not going to put anything in on that. Okay.
Mr. Chair, I would just say, yeah, it seems to me for this matrix, it would be hard to just fashion an option on the fly. Maybe once we get refined, we could send a signal one way or the other of a dollar target and some. But it feels to me like we would probably be guessing at what the right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. And it may be that we take kind of preliminary idea to the public on something in this particular area. And
see,
work
that
out
feels
something
right
more
to me.
Yeah.
That feels quite right to me.
Okay. Okay. So then the next items I just wanted to point out is on 55, 56, and 57, which are the Dwan greens fee increases. I took those and divided up the dollar impact on that so that they're additive. So if you want to have a $2 increase, you got to pick the $1 one and the $2 one. That gets you each, because each one gets you $1 of increase. Okay. Neil, you want $10? Is that what you're going to say? Okay.
I know that over the years, staff over there has sweat bullets on raising those green fees because it has a direct impact on the use of the course. And because most of the predominant users of that course are seniors. And I've heard a lot of bellyache in the last couple of years about what it costs already. And Dwan is not a $47 a play course. I mean, there's 6 of them around here that the choices are pretty open. So I think that one would probably take some study from a marketing standpoint from staff, so we don't get too arbitrary and cram it down their throat, because it might be a mistake.
So I guess maybe, to reflect your comment a little bit differently is if you look at this, these may not all generate the same amount of money, is what you're suggesting.
Right. It has to do with numbers of plays.
Okay.
And what Braymar's
John?
doing, and Eden Prairie's doing, and Apple Valley's doing. I mean,
Okay.
I play 6 different courses, and they're all the choices.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
if the committee is interested, and I know our Parks and Rec director has a chart prepared to show you the cost of Dwan versus some of these other courses that are being mentioned. So.
Okay. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
Thank you, Chris. Members of the committee. Kari, are you going to pull that slide up?
I can get it for you, Ann. Go ahead
Okay.
and start now.
That would be slide number 5. Thank you, Chris. Mr. Chairs, members of the committee, this slide shows the information specifically that was just requested. It shows the rate comparison for many local golf courses. As you may know, Dwan is over 50 years old and the golf course is in significant need of reinvestment. It is a prime metro location. It's shorter, it's very playable, and it's a very enjoyable golf course. And as mentioned, it is a favorite course definitely for older adults. Our rates are currently below market and were not increased in 2020. Chris, if you could advance 1, please. The $3 rate increase would put us in a much better position to be able to cover our operating costs and puts us in a more competitive market rate within the current market as shown above. And this slide shows the additional revenue that could be achieved with those $1, $2, and $3 rate increases.
Neil.
I'm not going to comment. I mean, I play all the time, and I've been a member of Dwan and the men's club there for years and years, and I know the howling that's going to go on. And Dwan ain't that good a course. I don't care what you say.
Okay.
It just doesn't hold up.
John.
Every year, I'm involved in a process of determining the fees for the 5 Three Rivers golf courses, and it's never simple. And so what I've learned over the years is that you'd think I'd have learned this in the cable business, but we never learned that after 35 years. But in the greens fee setting exercise, I've learned that the pace at which you change them matters quite a bit, as well as the amount you change them to. And I'm just curious if anybody knows when the last time we changed the greens fees at Dwan might have been. I feel like it was not long ago, but I don't know that. I don't know if Ann has.
And do you know what the history is on the Dwan fees?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I apologize. I have a very limited history here with the City of Bloomington. I can tell you that we did not increase the rate this year, but I apologize. I am not sure if there was a rate increase in the last 2 to 3 years. I do know that from many conversations with our golfers and with our staff at the golf course, that there certainly would be reluctance to raising the rates. We're just in a situation where we have an aging infrastructure, we have significant need for capital reinvestment, and we're in a position where we hope to be able to at least cover our operating costs.
Thank you.
Okay. So, were there other slides out of this deck that you wanted to show at this point? That would probably be the right opportunity to do it.
Chris, would you like me to go through the others at this point, or would you
I think
prefer
there's just
to?
4 or 5 of them, aren't there?
Yeah.
This
I
is a
think
similar
I can-
one for the aquatic park.
Yes, I can get through them fairly quickly, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. We thought maybe you might have a little bit of similar types of questions, specifically as it related to rates, and we thought we could maybe help to provide a little bit of context for you for some of the other areas in which we're also making recommendations for rate increases. As you can see at the Aquatic Center, our rates are also below market. Other cities don't provide young adult, child, or senior rates. And this is a rate structure that we hope to continue to modify over the coming years. Next slide, please, Chris. This slide shows our current rates, proposed rates in the 2021 budget, and the additional rate increases proposed. Even with these rate increases, our rates are still very low compared to the market. Also wanted to make you aware that we do have fee assistance in place. In fact, over 50% of the season passes sold are at a discounted rate due to fee assistance. Our total fee assistance discounts in 2019 were almost $19,000. Our next slides were a little bit of clarification on Creekside. We had modified in the most recent information provided the numbers from what was originally proposed. And that is because as we submitted our 2021 budget, we included some of the modifications specifically as it relates to staffing in our 2021 budget request. So as you see here in 2020, our original total property tax levy was just over $1 million. When we submitted our budget request for 2021, we included the staff changes that we made due to COVID in those cuts, which reduced the property tax levy for approximately $185,000. This reduced our staffing from 8.4 to 3.0 full-time equivalent positions. So with this change, it leaves an additional savings for closing Creekside at $472,000 from what was budgeted for 2021, and it leaves an additional savings for moving the programming to the BCA at $92,000 from what was budgeted in 2021. The 2021 budget also anticipates COVID impacts into at least the third quarter of 2021. The next slide, either scenario results in reduced programming, both due to historical low participation in some of those programs, staff cuts, and a reduction in hours. If Creekside remains open, but in a more limited basis, Fair for All, last week some questions were asked about some of the food programs. Fair for All, which is one of our food programs, could continue to run. That's only a once a month program. The Loaves and Fishes program would be relocated to a church in Bloomington. The lunch program would be canceled due to staffing requirements and equipment requirements, and we would certainly help people find other options for those meal programs. And in terms of hours, Creekside would close at 4:30 p.m. Monday through Friday, and we would offer very limited hours on weekends. And this would result in an approximately 25-hour reduction in operations per week. Chris, the next slide was about Dwan, which we already talked about. And then the next slide that I wanted to just provide slightly more context about was Highland Greens. And as I mentioned earlier, Dwan and Highland Greens are both older facilities in need of significant capital reinvestment. And exploring a partnership to operate Highland Greens allows the residents to continue to utilize this cherished golf asset for lessons, leagues, and practice in the city. And the city would not be responsible for its operations or for its capital reinvestment. A rate increase would definitely help to cover its annual operating costs, but does not help with significant capital investment problems at Highland Greens. Due to staffing changes as well as COVID impact, the Minnesota section of the PGA is unable to commit to a partnership at this time. We have had preliminary discussions with the Three Rivers Park District on taking over operations of the golf course. We also have some impacts to the fund balance of the golf enterprise, and Kari Carlson would be the expert to answer any questions as it relates to the levy for those facilities. And then I believe my last slide here, actually I have two more, I apologize, two more areas. One is about BIG, the Bloomington Ice Garden. I just wanted to provide a little bit more context to the increase in prime hour rates that we were proposing. BIG is one of the busiest rinks in the metro, and it's also over 50 years old and in significant need of capital reinvestment. This shows how our hourly 2020 rate compares to our metro competitors. Next slide, please, Chris. It's worth noting that we've had recent and significant rate increases. In 2019, our prime hourly rate was $213 an hour. In 2020, we increased that rate to $224 an hour. And we proposed an additional 5% rate increase in the 2021 proposed budget, increasing that hourly rate to $235. So that $235 puts us in a good market rate, especially considering the condition of the facility. An increase to the additional $240 or $247 an hour puts us in the high end of the market. And then the last two slides I have here are about youth programs. We have on this slide the 2019-2021 budgeted rates and the additional rate increases proposed. You'll also see a little bit of information about each program. Two of the programs are 1-week programs, two are 7-week programs, and one is a 9-week program. Last slide, please, Chris. We wanted to illustrate that even with the fee increases proposed, our rates are still well below the market rate. Comparing our weekly rates for the View and Mini View, our 2021 proposed rate is just $32 per week. This compares to the Eden Prairie program at $85 a week, the YMCA program at $200 a week, Edina at $70 a week, and the Bloomington School District Galaxy program at $71 per week. Our rate increase to $400 per season brings our dollar amount to $57 a week, and this also includes lunches and a pool pass. In 2019, 16% of our participants in the View received fee assistance, and 9% in the Mini View and Summer Adventure Playground program received fee assistance. Total fee assistance discount in 2019 was over $7,500 in youth programs. That's the additional information that I have before you this evening, Mr. Chair, and I'd be happy to answer any additional questions you might have.
Okay, any questions here?
Just a quick question.
I'll go ahead, Neil.
When you impact rates, as you're talking specifically, you probably can't get a handle on total revenue. I mean, you can't get a handle on Braemar's revenue or Bolt or whatever golf courses you had. And same thing with the pool. If you raise it, it looks good on paper, but if they don't show up, what have you accomplished? Is there any way you can get your arms around gross revenues and or user fee? How many users are using it compared to the other facilities that we're comparing prices with?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. And certainly, anytime you raise rates, you do run the risk of potentially losing customers and having them go to a different course. And I've certainly been in that situation over the years. And quite honestly, what happens a lot of times is they go away for a brief period of time, and then they do end up coming back. And I agree with the commissioner that said that the rate in which you provide fee increases also is important. And typically, we do have a strategy in place that does not overwhelm rate increases. I can tell you that specifically for the rate increases that were proposed in the Gulf Enterprise, we used the number of rounds on average over the last 5 years. So those are the way that we came up with the dollar amounts that we did for the rate increases that were proposed. And to your point about the golf course, you're right. There is a very, very wide range of numbers of rounds played at all of the different golf courses across the metro. But the way we calculated our cost was on the last 5 years of rounds at both of our golf courses.
Just to follow up, Mr. And a lot of that, again, at Dwan, depends on the men's club and the women's club. If they show up, you get a lot of rounds. If they opt to go to a different course to play league play, otherwise they show up twice a week and pay Bloomington twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. If they leave and go to Inverwood or any of those others, how do we ever get them back? That's the risk, and you're well aware of that. But once they go, they're gone. That's just a comment. You know?
Okay, other comments or questions? Okay, thanks for that information, Ann. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you cast me back to a percenter? There we go. Okay, any other conversation on the golf course item? We also talked about the Highland Greens item. We also talked about the Ice Garden rates.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
As long as we're still in it, could we just go back to the Highland Greens item for a second? And this might be Carrie, but I was trying to figure out the cost impact on on finding the partner, whether it be the PGA or Three Rivers, to run it, and the dollar impact was zero on the chart. But I was remembering back a number of weeks where it seems to me we were running a steady stream of about $250,000 to the bad. So like $250,000 in the hole on Highland Greens. Am I remembering that correctly? And so I'm just wondering if zero is the impact, or in other words, let's say the city ran Highland Greens in 2021 like it ran Highland Greens in 2019. Weren't we tapping into the general fund in 2019 for Highland Greens?
So, co-chairs and committee members, John, for the golf fund, there's currently a property tax support of $300,000,
$300.
and around about half of that is to support the operations for golf, but then another part is to try to build up this deficit that has grown over time for Highland Greens. And so currently when you look at the total working capital in the golf fund, it's maybe $90,000. There's not, it's way under where the working capital goal should be for what they need in that fund. And when you split it out between Highland and Dwan, the Dwan has been carrying Highland, where there's a $650,000 deficit at the end of 2019 for the Highland portion of the golf course. So with ending, if we didn't have the revenues from Highland, that would go away. But then some of the charges for or expenses that go for the golf course that are right now split between Dwan and Highland, some of that would go away completely, but some of it would come back for the golf courses. So kind of when you're looking at it overall, it's taking the revenue away. It sort of nets to zero. And maybe Chris would add to that, but kind of the main thing is looking for the amount of capital investment that is needed is where it's just we don't have that in the fund balance to do what's needed at Highland. Did you want to add anything to that, Chris?
I was just going to put sort of an underline on the fact that we can never generate enough money to pay for any kind of capital improvement or significant maintenance item or whatever. They're just covering sort of the wage costs that they're incurring year in and year out. And so that's, as Kari spoke, we have a goal for each of our funds that they're building up some money for those things that happen and those major expenses that come along every so often. And Highland has just not been able to build that up. And so it doesn't generate any ability to make any improvements to it or large maintenance items. And when those inevitably have happened over the years, it ate up its reserves, and it's never been able to restore those reserves. So the inability to fund capital investments is a critical issue for Highland that you don't necessarily see when you just look at daily operating costs versus revenue. And it's why it looks more neutral for 2021 if we were to cease operations, but we would be saving all that future capital investment that's needed.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So that suggests to me, though, that it wouldn't be net neutral for 2021. I'm not sure we have a number as to what the impact would be, but it sounds like if somebody else was running it, or if it wasn't run, there would be a net positive to the Bloomington city budget, whether it's capital or operating or both. And I just wondered if there was an estimate of that. My sense is that there was a $300,000 negative that would go away. I don't know if it went away this year. Everything went away, so there were no revenues, so I don't know what the balance played out. There must have been some expense just to keep it there.
We can take another look through that fund. I think as Kari stressed, though, there are a fair amount of costs that are shared between Dwan and Highland.
Sure,
And so if there is no Highland budget, then those costs fall. Some of them fall to Dwan, some of them go away. And Dwan is in a not unsimilar position. So we may be showing the need to build up funding for improvements to Dwan. As Co-Chair Peterson noted a few minutes ago, there's a need there to make capital investments in that course as well. So we'll take another pass through that.
It just my sense is it isn't zero. I don't know what it is, but given the numbers have been relatively substantial that we've talked about associated with these courses, maybe it's material.
Well, one thing you have to be a little bit careful about is that historically, that is treating some of the recreational activities as having to fund their capital costs and other ones not.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
Because
we have a lot of park facilities in the city that we've put capital money into that, clearly wouldn't on an operating basis kind of pay for themselves. But that's how recreational facilities get paid for in communities. And so just because the golf courses have big revenues associated with them, expecting them to fund their capital expenses, but telling things that have no revenues associated with them that don't have to, that's kind of a, kind of a backwards thing.
Yep.
In a way. So,
yep.
Maureen, did I see your hand up before or did I not? No? Okay. Anyone else? Okay. So on the Galaxy funding one, the question I had on that one is this completely at our discretion? And I noticed that it said eliminate or reduce. Is that a pick a number thing where we could say we'll spend $50,000 on that, we'll spend $75,000 on that? What is? And I think this is probably an and question. or Bakari, I don't know.
Getting Ann back here.
Yeah.
Chris, would you like me to handle that one?
Yes, please.
Thank you. I'd be happy to. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, we are currently operating without a signed agreement with the school district. We have not had a formal conversation with the school district about the elimination of this funding entirely, although we have had some conversations about changing some of the ways that we fund school district programs over the last year to 18 months. And yes, this one is a situation where we are providing some supplemental funding for the Galaxy School District program of $133,000, and that it would be something that we could propose a complete elimination or a reduction in the amount of funding that we provide to the school district.
Okay, thank you. Moving on then, it'd be item 71. And this was the play lot sale. This one I'm bringing up tonight because it's in the category of kind of being a predictable thing, and we can't really know what we could get for selling the play lot this year. Further, if you're going to sell the play lot, you'd have to kind of decide what sort of development potential you were going to sell it at, and that would require a bunch of process at the city council in order to make a decision on that. And so I would like to propose that we take number 71 and put it in the out of scope for this year being fiscal 21 bucket. And if the council decides they want to look at sales like that or of other property that they have, that they run a process in 21 to have a conversation about that and decide what they want to do. But that I think for our purposes, I don't think that's predictable enough to be an answer to our problem. Anyone have a objection to that? Okay, let's see here. So moving onward, I had tick marks next to these last ones because they were kind of newer things on the list. And so I'm wondering if folks have questions about those items. And this is basically a continuation of the section before where we opened up numbers for people to ask questions about things. So I would entertain questions about anything. It would be basically, I think, number 92 onward, I think is the new one. I think we had 91 last time. Yeah, that's right. So 92 onward, any questions about those? And Chris, if you'll keep an eye on IKEA while I'm presenting here, that'd be great.
She does have her.
Oh, she does have her hand. I'll call on IKEA then.
Hi, thanks, Chair Peterson. I do have a question about number 93 and 4. I guess all of them, actually. It just seems that it's unlikely that anything would change by the end of the year. And so how could we really use it as a tool for 2021? I mean, it seems like it would be difficult to implement in 2021. All 4 of them, actually. But that they could be considered for, budgetary needs in 2022, but you'd work on it in 2021.
Okay, so let's maybe break this up a little bit. 93 and 94, which are the negotiated contributions. I think the report we had last time was that there were some initial conversations, but we're nowhere near having something that's predictable on that. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'd propose then that 93 and 94 be put in the bucket of can't do it for 21.
Right.
Anybody object to that? John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It just has raised, though, kind of another process question in my mind. I wonder if we should be moving towards a set of other considerations. In other words, clearly a plan A, B, and C recommendation, which was requested. But I'm wondering if at this point we should be thinking about a final report that also notes that after input and some consideration, the following half dozen ideas seem worthy of exploration, and put almost a formal endorsement on the exploration, recognizing they're not probably something that are budgetable at this point.
Right.
At least maybe these first two wouldn't be.
Yeah, and I think those would fall into that category. So I think in general, my intention was to kind of precisely go down the line that you were talking about, was that at the end we would take and recap all of the things that we said were kind of future things that we thought maybe they're viable, but they weren't a fiscal 21 viable thing, and produce that list for the council and say, here's this list of things that we thought could be looked at. And if you decide to run another process next year, you could take that list to that group and ask them to go do that.
I would just say I like that, because at least 3 of the 4 here, I think, present genuine opportunity that, probably should start being explored if we're going to have any realistic opportunity to think about it for that next budget year, because it may well take exactly a year to get there.
Yep, that's a really good point. Okay, so Akia had basically proposed that 93, 94, 95, and 96 all go into that bucket. Folks okay with that? Anybody want to voice support for talking about any of those for next year? John?
Yep. It was, thank you. It was my understanding that 93, the motor vehicle, would be a relatively quick operation. If we decided to shut that down, it wouldn't be like a year. We'd be looking at like a couple months to close the motor vehicle if we decided to go that route.
So I think the concept that we've talked about is in this, that there's other line items that represent that closure, and the staff described that previously. What this was is that we would go to the county and say, hey, if we close our motor vehicle area, you're going to have more costs at your location in Edina, and maybe you want to do some subsidize the operation of our motor vehicle operation a little bit differently. Right. And so the question is whether we could conclude that negotiation. That's what 93 means, is concluding that negotiation in that time frame. And I don't know, Chris, if you've got anything more on that. You're over there kind of looking at me like you've got something more.
I do not have additional information at this time, other than that, the city manager's reaching out to Hennepin County to determine if they would engage in that conversation with us. You have several choices here. You're correct that if the council opted to discontinue offering the motor vehicle service, that service would likely be wound down fairly quickly in a matter of weeks or a couple of months. That is an option on the table. Another option on the table would be to determine or recommend to the city council that they continue to use taxes to subsidize motor vehicle for another year while we explore options, and then come back to it again next year and see if any progress has been made and if they wish to continue. So they're sort of both true. If you want to go this particular route of trying to get Hennepin County to assist us financially, it'll take some time. If you feel prepared to make a recommendation now, and the council were to accept that recommendation, they could take action fairly quickly. Also, I've gotten a message from the Park and Rec director with the Dwan rates, and the last increase was in 2019, and it went up by $1. And before that, the last increase was in 2015 by $1. So we have had 2 increases in the last 5 years, and they were $1 in 2015 and $1 in 2019.
Okay, thanks for that information. Saad, did that answer your question?
It did, yes.
So what are your thoughts? Do you think that would be in scope, or do you think it falls in the out of scope for 21 bucket?
I would lean more towards out of scope for 21, given how late we are in the year.
Okay. Any other feedback on those 4 items? Okay, one last call were there any of the items that people had additional questions. We got quite a bit of information in the packet this time. We got the expected kind of public feedback has started to arrive, so we're starting to get feedback from people. People are starting to pay attention to what's going on. We got quite a bit of kind of content about particular changes that we're making. So we've all had a chance in the packet over the weekend to kind of read that information, get questions answered from the staff. So we'll have one last round if folks have any questions on any items. Otherwise, what we're going to do next, if I'm not forgetting anything, is that we're going to have another round of putting dots on pieces of paper. Okay, any final questions here? Okay, at this time then, what we're going to do, and for folks who are watching at home, we're probably going to have a 20 or 25-minute period here where we're off recording this and tallying it, but we're going to be off kind of creating an updated ranking for each person. Spread around the room, there are sheets that people are putting dots on, and then we are going to be dividing up the sheets and entering them in this spreadsheet. And when we come back, the spreadsheet that you see being projected right now is going to have data in it from the data collection that we've done, and then we'll start the conversation that I described. So unless there's anything that somebody wants to bring up before we break for that.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, go ahead.
is your preference that we vote on each item?
Yeah, so I think the answer, so if you do not put a sticker next to something, the effect of that is that it delegates the responsibility for ranking that one to everybody else. Okay, so it doesn't cause it to rise up. It doesn't cause it to go down. It just purely causes your voice not to be heard on a particular item. And that happened some last time. And if that's how people are feeling on a particular item, they can go ahead and do that. But if you really think that something shouldn't be done, the correct color for a I really think it shouldn't be done thing is the red color. It's not kind of withholding your voice. Does that make sense? Okay. So just to recap on a couple of these things, for example, on the Dwan fees increase, you can't vote to increase the increase from $1 to $2 unless you vote for the original one. So for the ones that are nested, be sure you're taking that into account. That clarifies it and makes the ranking work better if we do that. Then we had a couple items that we put out of scope. So I will, in the spreadsheet, mark those so that they show up at the bottom. So you don't have to worry about giving those particular ones negative votes. Those will automatically fall to the bottom. Okay, with that then, we will start the process of putting stickers on pieces of paper. We'll be back soon. get back started.
Money's in the machine.
Chris, may I be the presenter again, please? Thank you. Okay, so the first sort that I did for conversation purposes was causing things that we didn't agree very strongly about. And actually, to step back for a second, looking through it, I was surprised at how often we had either all green or lots of green and yellow or lots of yellow and red. So there's a surprising amount of agreement as we've been having conversations. But I think like these top 10 ones on here are worth just kind of walking through and pointing out where we had lots of disagreement. So just to recap here, like this one, for example, the fire department tuition reimbursement, we had, it was kind of spread pretty evenly across the whole group. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just walk through here and see if there's anyone who wants to kind of argue, in favor of changing something here, or if we just want to kind of continue on. But starting would be this fire department tuition reimbursement. It's $3,000, but there was a lot of disagreement on that.
Are you looking for a decision, Mr. Chair? Or?
I think just if people want to advocate for one position or another on maybe changing it.
I have trouble getting real excited about $3,000.
I do too. I'm hard pressed to even bring it up as a first thing to talk about. So maybe I'll move on. The pass rates at the aquatic facility, we're very evenly divided on that one.
Which one's that? We can't see it.
Number 45, Family Aquatic Center increased child and senior pass rates. Another one, we're moving on to the next one, adding voluntary fees at Creekside. That one had a couple no votes, but we had 5 people who voted on it and pretty even across the board. Another one was handing the beach over to Three Rivers Park District. We had a lot of disagreement on that. Not very many votes on that one, though.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to jump in. My sense is that one would be worth revisiting with a little bit more information if we can get it in this time frame. I sense that perhaps some of the not voting it is so undeveloped.
Not sure? Yeah.
And I'm not sure if Ann thinks there's enough time to give a little more definition to it by next week. But
okay. That one has a fairly low score of 21, so it's likely to be down toward the bottom. But I think we can either get more information for next week, or we can just kind of let it ride where it's at. And when we come back through on the final pass, after we get the community feedback, we could talk about it then.
Great. Or it might even be one of those ones that ends up in that bucket and for considerations in a
Absolutely.
future year, maybe.
Okay. We had a lot of disagreement on the changing the rate increase at the ice garden from 2 to 5%. 4 in favor of it, but then, in terms of yellow and red, 5 people in those categories. Is the feeling that it was for the reds and yellows that it was just too much?
The 5%.
The 5%? Yeah. Okay. Another one that got a lot of, that had support at both ends of the spectrum was the fee to the youth athletic groups for field utilization. I think it's pretty obvious why there'd be conflict on that one. Okay. Computer replacements. So, Akia, did you have a question?
Sorry, no.
So I saw a comment go by, but I didn't really see it. So, okay. Special investigations overtime. So that one has a 57. So that's probably going to be in one of our cut lists. So just be aware of that. And then the 9th item would be the supplementary cultural support for artistry. And that's an increment on top of the other money that they get. Is that right? There were two, if I remember right on this, there were 2 buckets of money. John?
Yeah, if I might on that one, because that one is a little bit confusing because there are various buckets. So this 50,000 line item would relate to the roughly $200,000 a year grant that the city has been providing artistry for the last 5 years. And that was a 5-year understanding that expired this year. So what this would represent is that rather than continuing on at that level, or no level, it proposes a $50,000 amount. So it's a reduction to about 25% of the level that particular grant's been at for 5 years.
Okay.
So it's, I think the concept behind a $50,000 level would be, sure, it's all shut down, but if an organization like that gets too Spartan during a maybe 2-year pandemic/recession, and given how much contributed money occurs and all the volunteer money and the momentum break, does it become borderline lethal? So I think that's the rationale behind the 50. And then there are 2 other sources. The one looks similar. I think that's the $1 million or whatever for the Bloomington Center of the Arts. That's really not related to artistry. And then there's a grant that a bunch of the arts organizations, a grant pool that a bunch of the arts organizations participate in, and artistry does participate in that one. And I think we're proposing that would go down as well. But this one is tied to that 5-year contract that expired.
Okay. So then looking at these ones that all had the same kind of score around kind of how much we agreed, I'm going to pick out a couple of these other bigger ones that are at that level rather than going through every single dollar amount. So there were 2 in here related to police, the commander and the roll call pay in there, that we had a lot of, these are ones that had 4 people with red on them. In fact, if we look here a little bit, those are kind of, if you look at ones that had 4 people who were pretty strongly opposed to it, those and the social service grants and nonprofits are the ones that had the kind of strongest negative feelings on them.
What was your question, Chair Peterson?
I think what we're just doing is we're just looking at these and seeing if there's anything in particular that we want to bring up about these particular items. So if you go look at these scores here, what's going to happen when we resort there is the higher number ones are, we're gonna go from high to low on things. So, Maureen.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair Peterson. So, just a couple of comments and my perspective on, and excuse me as I squint, but I think it's the commander and the roll call for the 2 police.
Yeah.
I was reflecting over the weekend looking at the packet and spending time going through some of the listening sessions from the community and the business session. And one thing that stood out loud and clear when asked what they felt very strongly about and what was an asset important to them, and that was public safety and feeling safe. There was just an overwhelming theme throughout those particular sessions. And so I really took to heart that, granted, all these are very challenging and difficult decisions, but I'm hearing loud and clear from the residents who have just initially participated that public safety and having a safe community is their pretty much their number one or number two priority. So with that being said, just so the committee knows where my mindset is, and when I went through and put my dots for public safety and the police, I'm one to say that I pretty much did red dots and maybe a couple of yellow. So again, I reflected back, and if you go back and you look at the comments from these sessions, you're going to see just this overwhelming comments about public safety and feeling safe, and they like their neighborhood. So,
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, John.
I too was kind of a Red Baron when it came to police, probably no surprise. But based on a couple of things, experience being one, and then the national picture right now is very unfavorable. And police are under an incredible amount of scrutiny. And I think we have kind of a gem here in Bloomington that you look at the effectiveness of the police, the acceptance of public safety in Bloomington, and John mentioned on one other issue that sometimes you lose momentum over a few years if you start cutting back. And I'm afraid if we start cutting back, we don't just automatically, well, we're going to improve now, so we're going to replace all these positions. I'm afraid to start cutting, and that we're not going to pay a pretty significant price. I look at what the department does aside from the basic law enforcement piece. Most of what police do is non-police related, and that's across the country. We help find lost children. We give advice on a lot of different things. We direct traffic. I mean, it's not, cops and robbers kinds of things. But Bloomington is special in the fact that they reach out. And if you look at how they spend their non-call time, dedicated resource time, it's stop, coffee with a cop, it's getting out and talking to people, it's building relationships, and that's why they've got such a high rating. Because people respect them. They think the work that they do is second to none. So I've got to put my 2 cents in that I think it's more than just saving some dollars. I think it's risking a high quality, effective plan of protecting this community. And if we start cutting the roll call pay, I mean, that's a 15-minute segment. Every person that comes to work and every day and 365 days a year. That I'm crazy enough to say I'm less concerned about that, but then there are times when there's nobody on the street. The commander, now we're taking the pie and asking more responsibility. We used to have 6 commanders. We only got 4 now. And now we want to cut another one. We got 5, excuse me, yes. Is the 5th position open?
All 5 positions are filled at the moment, but we have a pending retirement
Yeah.
that would create a vacancy, and this is talking about not
Right.
filling that vacancy when it occurs later this year.
Right. And that, you bring up a good point. A vacancy not filled is well, it is what it is. But I'm starting to ramble a bit, but I've experienced it. I've seen it. I've had the pleasure of being the chief here and see what these officers do. And I'd put them against any other department. So they earned the reputation they have. Nobody gave it to them. I'll stop there.
Thanks, John. Other comments or questions here Does Akia have a question, or are you raising your own hand?
Akuya has her hand up, and the
Okay.
city manager would.
I think Chairperson. Yeah, I had a comment, I suppose, and I think everybody in the community can appreciate the value that police have in the community, but so too does every other department that we are considering making cuts from. And I don't personally believe that if we were to hold off on hiring a position for a year and a half, that the city of Bloomington would turn to shambles for any such reason. So that shouldn't be a reason for us not to seriously consider making appropriate cuts in the short term, especially if we're looking at comments from the community from the listening sessions.
Thanks, Akia. Jamie?
Thank you. Good evening, committee members. I just wanted to follow up on the comments from Mr. Gibbs on the artistry cultural support. I'm not sure I heard John correctly, so I just want to make sure that we're clear. He was referring to the 5-year agreement we had between the city and the organization. That was a $200,000 a year supplemental grant to the other program. That was accurate. The $50,000 that we had in the budget was a placeholder in the event that we were to continue to have a supplemental grant. So this would wipe out any supplemental support aside from the cultural arts grants that artistry participates in. So I wanted to make sure, John, that I understood what you were saying, that it was a quarter of what it was before. It would actually zero it out altogether.
It would zero it out. Yes. Well, thank you. You were much more articulate than I was, but yeah.
Okay. Other comments and questions on this view, which is kind of the agreement disagreement view. If not, what I'm going to do then is I'm going to now go and resort the list, and it's going to be based on the rank order using the scoring that we talked about earlier. Okay, so I'm going to make some things a little bit smaller here so more shows up on the screen. How is this working as an eye chart for people so far? For the glasses kind of desires, is that's working for you? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So here's our picture. I think I can squeeze one more kind of size boost out of it if I'm careful. Yeah. Oh, I do want to, what I do want to do though is I want to show the cumulative total. So hold on here just a second. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the cumulative total. I'm going to just show where the breakpoints are right now, because I think the breakpoints are kind of where we'll be interested in at this point in the discussion. So I think what we'll do here is I'm going to focus in a little bit on kind of where the breakpoint is between things. Maybe what I'll do is I'll start out by showing this and paging through it just so people can read it. And then we'll switch back and we'll look at kind of where things fell at the dividing line between the various levy scenarios. And we can see if there's things that look kind of just completely wrong or we want to adjust around that. So I'll leave this here for a minute or two for people to look at it. Is everybody ready for me to push page down at this point? Okay. Let's go down one. So you can see at the finance staffing, that's the last item in the 5% bucket. So
Mr. Chair,
yeah, go ahead.
Could you go back up to number 3? I just want to make sure I'm understanding the difference between 88,500 and the 225,000.
You're talking about the motor vehicle
Yeah.
one.
I'm just
You-
making
you-
sure.
but You're talking about the change in the dollar amount that was put in here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you just, what is the savings? Is it 88,500 or is it 225,000?
Yeah, Chris, why don't you go ahead?
Mr. Chair and committee members, the savings would be $225,000. As you heard early on in your meetings, the city uses a variety of internal service charges
Yep.
to allocate overhead. The original savings number listed assumed that we would reallocate those overhead charges to other departments.
Okay.
The city manager has given the direction that we would not reallocate those overhead charges, in those areas that provide that overhead would just have to tighten their belt and live without the money that they were getting from motor vehicle.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're now back on the second page. So one thing that's notable here to me is if you look around that 5 to 3% levy transition there, there's a lot of items in there that have the same score. Okay, and so what that tells me is that there's potential for opportunities to move things around there if people are feeling that something should have been scored differently. We don't have to bring that up right now, but we'll get back to talking about that in a little bit. But that's one thing I'm noticing in this pattern. I'm going to hit the page down now. So you can see on the bottom there, that's where we get to the 0% levy items start to show up. Okay, let me advance this once more. And a final time here. So right in the middle there, you can see where we transition into things that would not be cut in any scenario. And I want to point out that some of these at the bottom here that have 9 reds, that's how I coded things to force them to the bottom when they couldn't be considered as part of this year. So that's what that's recognizing there. Neil, go ahead.
Give me the numbers. Again, the 0 increase levy amounts to cuts of what?
Well, I'll just show you here. So we can if I make
Give me
this
those
be a little bit
numbers.
bigger, and I kind of make the score be smaller, what's going to end up happening here, you'll see where the 0% levy we got to get down in this neighborhood. We got to generate. We got to generate
4.8.
little bit under 4.8.
Okay.
If we go back up here, we generate, 2.8 to get to the 3% number.
8, okay.
And again, this is the way the spreadsheet works. It assumes that the last item can't be cut in half, so it keeps picking items until you've fully fulfilled the reduction that you have. So these numbers here are necessarily slightly higher than what the staff provided as the actual target numbers. Then the breakpoint between 5 and 3 was about 1.6 in there. Does that answer your question? Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. So what I'm going to do here now that we've kind of gone through that list, is we're just going to look real quickly at I think we can hide this at this point because we're done talking about that. We're going to talk a little bit about these, or think about these items here around the breakpoint between the 5 and the 3% number. And I guess the question would be, are there things that got cut in the 5% scenario that, or are there trades basically at this line that you would be making? Because these items up here are things in the 5% scenario that we would cut. These are things that we would be the first things that we would be cutting in the 3% scenarios.
Well, Mr. Chair, I might
go ahead,
just
John.
suggest that in some of these, while they may not be big numbers, if some of these are in that sort of tie category, but are likely to play out on the natural just because of a slow recovery or slow exit from COVID, just feels to me like those might be easy ones to move into the 5%. I'm thinking there's a conference travel just under the line, for example, and I thought there was another one that seemed to tie to the current circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Just as a way of reshuffling, that feels easy.
I'm going to make some notes. I'm not going to sit and adjust this in a big way
Yeah,
right
no.
now, but I'm going to make some notes where there's some things like that move travel up when possible. Neil, did I see your
Yeah,
hand?
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
I would propose that we take the $80,000 in ash tree removal and pull that up into the 5% area, and then bring back down there some of those smaller items, the travel and the stuff. And I have heartburn over that ash tree cut down. Again, you go out the Dwan golf course, and on Overlook Drive, there are like 8 stumps that are about 24 inches in diameter, all cut down because of a contract with a supplier who has the free right to go down and cut down ash trees. And it was reported to us a week ago that staff could do that in the winter and just start taking down those trees that are bad, and not cutting down all the others until their time is due, and then we can plug back in travel and education and some of those things. That would be a worthy trade-off in my mind.
So what you're proposing then is that this
Full.
$120,000, which is the one for that item, would go up into the 5% bucket, and we
Yep.
would identify $120,000
Yep.
with items up here to move
Right.
down. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have suggestions on? Because like in baseball, typically they say both sides of the trade. I think.
Well, I think you'd look at things that are staff services, education, and some of that thing is, you'd have to scroll back up again.
Yeah. So I think one of the things, and I agree with John on this, is that kind of travel-related things, like going to physical conferences, unlikely to get spent in next year, given the circumstances.
Yeah.
So I think I'm open to I'm open to the idea of switching. The question is what are the things that you would be picking from this top bucket? This rank here scored higher. It's not enough to pay for the community development director. And the other thing that we can choose to do, now that we kind of see the order of this, is that we can choose to say, we're going to kind of walk through this and have a little bit of discussion tonight and come back next week and make the final decision so that people have a chance to ponder it. I want to leave the opportunity in case there was the lightning bolt of consensus that occurred tonight. The other thing to remember is that what we're doing here is we're making a proposal that we're taking to the public. It's not our final decision. So we shouldn't be sitting here thinking that we're setting anything particularly in concrete at this point. I think when we get feedback from the public, we have the freedom to adjust this in any way we want based on that feedback or based on information that we learn from any source between now and when we're making the final decision.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I've had a question brought to my attention digitally about why there's an item that had all green votes, yet it landed in the second category.
We'd have to have a look here and see. Had all green votes.
Number 31.
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
Chair and committee members, I
Yeah.
think because since it doesn't have 9 full votes, just the total score is going to be
Oh, it's total
lower.
score. Okay.
We may need to
Yeah,
go
so I need
in
to.
between now
I need to
and
go on. Yeah, I need to go and adjust for that. I'm not
Adjust.
adjusting for that. That's why that's there. Let me think if I can fix that quickly here.
one of our armchair statisticians has
Absolutely.
suggested 6 points for for missing votes
Yeah.
would neutralize it.
That would
Yeah.
do it.
So
Probably mine.
That's making my head hurt.
Yeah.
Green dots.
so
I usually use them.
let's see here. Is this going to do the right thing?
6 points.
Council's not going to do 5 anyway.
So let's just see if this is doing what we want here.
Well,
So that one's higher than that.
they sure didn't sound like it.
So this one at 7 and 1 is higher than the one at 7 and 2. So I think this formula is doing what I want. I'm looking at the finance people who are also Excel people. Okay. This is almost certainly going to put us in the category of kind of validating this after the meeting and coming back. What I want to do is this is going to be score number 2. And we're going to resort by that.
Well, bring it back. Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, go ahead.
the rate we're going, we're going to be here till 10 o'clock. I would suggest we bring it back. Let's
Yeah.
meet again next
Okay.
week and
Yeah.
get it done.
So let's just quickly, though, we'll go down here and just look at the dividing line here. And I think actually my adding the column has broken the dividing line logic. So I think you're right. I think we're going to, what this is going to do is this is going to end up having us come back for next week and go and do that. But just to quickly go through and look at things in the revised order, so just so people get a sense of it, because we walked through that once before, and if people are watching, I want to make sure that we're providing the right information. So at least the rank order right now is kind of this rank order right here. If everybody's ready, I'll move ahead. Saw some nods. Okay, I'm going to advance it again. Once more. Moving down. Then the final page here. Then in terms of the breakpoints, I actually figured out while we were doing that how to get the breakpoints to work again. So I'll show you where the actual dividing lines are. So between the 5 and the 3%, this is now where the line ends up landing here.
We're going to get a copy of this.
Yep, absolutely. Maybe in a slightly different format to make it a little bit easier to consume when we're done, because a lot of the detail in this we don't need going forward. We just need the ranks, and then we can, because in the next meeting, basically what we'll be doing is adjusting the ranking directly, is how we'll end up exiting this. John?
Mr. Chair, although, and I'm not critical of this process at all, but the one thing it does, it becomes pretty clinical and numerical, but it takes a lot of the intangibles out of it.
Yep.
And so I really am glad we're coming back, next week to actually talk about those intangibles.
I think it's good for people to have some time to think about
And
it.
I think maybe, rather than rankings, I think the data, if on Friday or whatever we could get, the actual numbers across, it probably would help.
We can print it on a legal size sheet and do it that way.
That'd be really good.
I need to make that fit, so.
We could come back next week and everybody bring a dollar bill and we'll play liar's poker.
Yeah, right.
It's what we think this council's going to do anyway. And then land there.
Yeah, okay. So I'll just go and show the, let's see, here's the 5 to 3 breakpoint, which we looked at, and then the 3 to 0 breakpoint is right here. And then moving along to the bottom here, the breakpoint for the for this here, for things that would not be included, kind of fall at this level. Okay, so to kind of wrap up tonight's meeting, what you'll get in the packet for next week, and that will be included in the agenda materials for the public, will be this spreadsheet sorted in this order with the breakpoints in there. I think the form that will want people to make proposals next week is, I think that people should have to come forward with a trade. In other words, I think you need to come and say, I would like to move this up, and the way I'm going to pay for it is move that down, so that we can adopt something as a unit that is neutral in terms of the impact of things. Okay? So when you're looking, for example, if you're somebody like me who thinks the crime analyst is important and you want that to go into the no bucket, you got to find $120,000 in the no bucket to push the other way.
We can cut a deal, Steve. No problem.
That's right. And that, at this point, it's about, we're trying to build a
trees.
Yeah, that's right. And the other thing to remember is that we still have a lot of time to get information. So we're going to be out talking to the community about this at 2 meetings in October. And given the feedback that we've been getting from the kind of former staff members and folks in the community who know a lot about this, a lot of useful information has already been coming out, and I'm certain that we'll get more as time passes. I think if people have the mental picture that we're proposing something that we think is going to be the final thing, I think it's far from it. I think the thing that we're proposing is going to be a starting point for the conversation. And it's very likely when we exit this process at the end of October, it looks substantially different from what we started with in meaningful ways. Okay. Any final comments from folks before we wrap it up for tonight? Anything from the staff? Kari? Jamie, you're lurking in the background. Is there anything you want to add?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Good discussion tonight. Appreciate it.
Okay. So with that, looking at the agenda, there is nothing further on tonight's agenda. So with that, our meeting stands adjourned.